Hey, what's up? Hello, Grief Sense Familia. How we doing today? If you don't already know what the movement is about, it's about normalizing grief sense. What does that mean? That means normalizing conversations around death. And we do that through holding space to talk about loss, confronting our mortality. And we also do this through the lens of social justice, creative expression, community care, as well as pop culture. So as you interact with these episodes, please reflect on how grief sense shows up in your life. And if you have a story that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to reach out. You can reach us at info@griefsense.com via email. Now with that, hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Welcome, listeners of Grief Sense. The guest that I have on for the show today is Xavier Beauvoir. I am so excited and honored to have Erica on the show today. I am even more excited for you all to hear all the insights that they have to share. I want to just share how I know Erica, how I met them, and then dive in right into the conversation. I met Erica through a good friend of mine, Kristen, and Kristen and I used to actually work together. And I always heard amazing things, and I was so excited to finally meet Erica recently for a trip. We went to Mexico for a friend's wedding. We had a blast. It was amazing. I learned all the things about sun gazing and integrating indigenous practices in my daily routine. But again, so I will hand it over to you, Erica, to introduce yourself. And
yes, we are here. We made it. So I wear a lot of hats in the community. I'm a psychic medium, indigenous healer and priest, a storyteller for spirit, a land harmonizer, a death doula, and a mentor to many on their spiritual journey as well. And when you move with all of the things that I move with and do, there is really no piecemealing that information. Holistically, that is all that I do. That is all that I am. And it goes to whatever space that I'm occupying at that moment. So that concept of taking up space, I take up all the space in the room because of the things that I do know from this realm and other realms that are unseen. I am grateful to be here. I also heard a lot about you, Mimi, in reference to meetings and your passion and all these things. I'm grateful to be in this space and to finally navigate a conversation.
This conversation is, I will try not to be biased, but I think this will probably be my favorite episode.
Don't be biased now.
I know. It's just, I think in the day-to-day conversations with folks, there's a lot of superficial. And when you're willing to go beyond the surface, you get to really reach a deep and meaningful place. And that's what I hope listeners get from what I already know and embrace about you. I just hope that they soak it all in. But with that and touching upon gratitude, you talk a lot about gratitude and you talk a lot about honoring our ancestors and honoring those who have transitioned. So I want to ask you, is there anyone that you would like to honor today? So for you to say their names and let's do that.
Whew. My list is long, but I'll keep it brief for this. I'll elevate because I think the type of work that I do, the spiritual work that I do, the indigenous work that I do is also linked to liberating my ancestors who couldn't say the things that I'm able to say now and to live the way that I live so openly and freely within my spiritual powers. So I want to make sure that I uplift the abolitionists that are in my blood and the ones that created space for me to learn lessons and grow. First, I'll start with, there's four I'll uplift. First would be Thomas Dorsey. Thomas Dorsey is Googleable. Thomas Dorsey was a habitual runaway slave. He continuously left, and one time he left, bought his freedom, and then eventually got rich in Philadelphia and was a part of the abolitionist movement and did catering for the likes of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. So his rebellious spirit is coursing through my veins. His son, I'll elevate Will Dorsey. Will Dorsey was a archivist. He scrapbooked all of the articles that were around Black thought, Black people, Black history. And his archive was some of the archive and information that was used for the papers that W.E. Du Bois wrote that talks about Black history and the intricacies and nuances of different cities in Black history. So him being an artiste and archivist and an abolitionist runs through my veins as well. And his granddaughter, my grandmother, Emma Kate Smith, was a school teacher, a real estate agent, jack of all trades, the quintessential Christian witch. We know those people that go to church on Sundays and then they put salt around their houses on Saturday. Okay. Okay. Florida water. All right. Water across in all the rooms, making sure they catch all the bad spirits. And then they are proudly wearing their church hat on Sunday. That is my grandmother. And she taught me how to blend in and also show out. So I elevate her. And then lastly, I elevate my late uncle, Andrew Brown. He was a pinnacle in me knowing that I am to help others, that I am a person of servitude, and that I needed to do that in a big scale. And for him, big scale was maybe you should be a comedian or an actor or something like that. And I said, I don't know about all that. I get it in my face, but we'll see where it takes us. And he gave me a lot of insight and confidence to move with all that I am and to do so in a way that was unapologetic. So I'll raise him into the space as well.
Wow. I love all of that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I wanted to make, you actually helped inspire carving this out as a segment in the podcast, because even though I do this in my daily routine every day, it's not normalized for this individualistic, westernized society that we live in. And I think that, and you alluded to it so beautifully, just really acknowledging our ancestors and that the fact that we stand on their shoulders, like we literally would not be here without them. But so much of our people that look like me are disconnected from their roots or don't have that connection to their roots. And so I just think it's very inspiring for people to go through that exploration. And once they do, not to be afraid of what they might learn, but to embrace it, to honor it. And then, of course, with more recent losses or people that might transition, including that in the honoring of our folks that have passed, our ancestors. So Thank you for pouring into the community. And I love that. So now I want to hold space as much as you want to share, as much as you don't want to share. It's totally up to you. Would you be comfortable sharing your grief story? And I know that might be a loaded question of sorts, because I'm sure you have your own grief story, but you've also played a pivotal role in so many other folks' grief stories. So I can only imagine what you're about to share.
This grief story is a meshing and melding of a personal death, an inner death that happened to me based off of a physical death of my late grandmother that then triggered a rebirth. Right?
It's like goosebumps already. They already started.
Within public service, there was a lot of lessons and opportunities of growth, and recognizing that there was a lot that needed to happen. And it actually did not start with laws and policy. It started with inner transformation and healing and spiritual practice and getting back to my roots. At the tail end of my service, my late grandmother and my uncle passed away within the same year.
Wow.
Before that, I did not have a close recollection of what grief felt like in adulthood, because most of the folks that passed away it was in my childhood. And I have memories. I have funny memories. I have all kinds of memories around it, but it didn't feel visceral to my existence until a couple of years ago. So my uncle passed first, and I realized something happened to my body when he passed. I was asleep and in that in-between space, and then I heard him say my name rather loudly. I woke up, and so that just couldn't be. Or was I coming out of what just happened there? A couple of months later, my grandmother passed away, and the same thing happened where I heard her. She was definitely more gentle. She said my name, and I said, there's something going on here. My grief was heavy because they were my favorite people. They gave and they poured so much into me. Much of who I am are remnants of them. So I cried a lot. Yeah. Going to work was difficult. And I remember going in front of my ancestor altar and saying, please, whoever can hear this, I just need to know that my grandmother is safe and my uncle is safe. Within 2 minutes of me saying that and crying in front of my altar, we talked about this is 4:00 in the morning. There's a loud bang on my window. To the point where I'm like, somebody trying to come in, let me go grab a gat. There's no reason for that to be happening at 4:00 in the morning. I don't know who's banging on unless they're trying to get in. I go to the back. I check the back. There's no one there. There's nothing. There's no rocks. There's nothing to give me any clear details in reference to what just occurred. I went back to my altar and I said, if that was my sign, can y'all bring it down a couple of notches? Because I almost left my whole body because of that sign.
Ancestors came through.
Oh, they came through. They came through. But I realized at that moment how powerful my ancestors were. Even in my grief, they showed up powerfully to let me know that they are still here, no matter what is happening, no matter what ground they're in, or however we decide to get rid of the body, their spirit never dies. The energy within their spirit is still palpable and strong as the many times you say their name. Wow. If you don't say their name, they go on, but they don't go on with potency. They're there, but the more you speak their name and conjure them up into this reality is when they can bump up against the veil. That's when they can bump up. So in my grief, I gained power. In my grief, I realized how real my ancestors were. My veneration and saying their names every single day was charging them to give me a sign. In my tears, it was the right alchemy for them to know that I still wanted them around. In my sorrow, they brought forth happiness, because now I know every single moment someone is with me. Every single moment. They never leave me alone. If I need a protector, that protector is here. If I need my grandmother, I call her and she's here. In my grief, I found liberation. In my grief, I found indigenous ways of being.
Yes.
And then I realized that's why my folks back in the day were so powerful. They were so powerful because they knew this magic. They knew that if they yelled up to the sky that they needed assistance, that people were going to show up. We, in this society, have moved so far away from supernatural, from spirit. Now we're just like these rungs on a wheel, and we are just going and not giving time and effort and energy to charge the magic that's in us. My grief allowed me to find, seat, and root my power. It caused a rebirth. The person that I was before that was so focused on retiring from a stable job, from making sure that everything made sense in my life, trying to stay on some fake timeline that everybody else was on, trying to be successful in whatever that meant to other people and not myself. And then the rebirth happened, and I realized none of that was true. Wow. What I am supposed to do is what spirit wants me to do, because that's where my abundance and my success lies. It's not with me retiring from this job where none of my gifts are elevated. Not saying that I couldn't use my gifts. I have.
Right.
But I'm supposed to fully be able to use my gifts. And you know what happened? I ended up in a position where I am now, where I'm able to use all of my gifts and get paid for it by a government, because I leaped. I surrendered. That moment when people say, when it comes to any type of practice, really, you have to surrender to spirit. You have to surrender to God. You have to surrender to something. You have to leap. You have to take the leap of faith. That is synonymous. Even in indigenous practice, you have to believe in your ancestors. You have to believe that they can help you and assist you and protect you. You have to believe it. So in my rebirth, I became who I was sent here to be. And it was all stemmed from the grief, the sorrow, the pain, the joy, the nostalgia of my grandmother, Emma Kate, and my late uncle, Andrew, who were the catalysts. They had to pass in order for me to regenerate into somebody else.
That is just so incredibly powerful. Everything you said, I got, like J-Lo used to say on American Idol, I got the goosies. All the goosies. Because I resonate with everything you said so deeply. And I think that no matter what age that you are forced to confront mortality, I always use this phrase, confronting mortality, right? Because some of us have to, or not have to, but we have confronted our mortality a lot younger than other people have. And that has a lot to do with the way our society is set up, right? The way everything is, the institutions, the way we're socialized, all the things literally have an impact on us and the way we show up. And it just really resonates with me because my grief journey started very young. My father passed, I was 8 months old, and I never really got to grow up with him, meet him, know him. And so all I had was stories, pictures here and there. And it just felt that in life, it feels everyone is dealt a certain deck of cards. And it felt that my deck just happened to have a lot of death cards in it. It was just lots of loss. But something that really stood out to me from what you said was my grief liberated me. I think that I found what I was supposed to do. I feel like I found my purpose on this earth because of my grief. And this is why you are on Grief Sense today. I truly believe that my business coach always says there's dollars in my DNA. And who knew that all the death and loss that I had to confront in my life would lead to having my own business. And for me, it's not even about the money. It's not recognition or anything like that. It's healing. It's honestly healing, because we often don't talk about the things we need to heal from. So just having these types of conversations are so important to me. I don't necessarily have all the answers on how everyone is different, right? When it comes to death planning and how, what's in a will, what services you want. I'm not necessarily the person that has all the answers to help people in that way. However, I do feel that I'm a conduit for messages, and in that sense, just holding space to normalize conversations and helping people just become aware of it, and that this information runs deep. That's why I think it's so powerful to connect with people like yourself, because you know how deep these roots go. And if we don't take the time to explore that, think of how many of our people passed away or will continue to pass away without doing that exploration work or getting in tune with spirit or just with their ancestors and everything that entails. And I just think it's really important work. But I think that everyone is, and you mentioned it too, people are essentially conditioned to be afraid of what they don't know. But as we all know, everyone rejects what they don't understand. But once you take the time to understand, you end up appreciating what you learned, and then you start integrating it into your life, hopefully. So I just think that's really powerful stuff there.
Yeah, I think supremacy is meant to keep you away from your power.
Yep.
And keep you confused. If you are if you're constantly in a space of confusion or away from your truth, then you are easily manipulated. Even history, right? How history is given to us keeps us confused and in the dark of what the truth is. As a psychic medium, I get direct information from spirit about what the truth is. Now, some of those things, spirit says that would cause chaos, so don't. But the premise behind them saying that is we're so knee deep in confusion and not knowing the truth that the mere sense of getting the truth, a conspiracy theorist or unwell or something on the lines of that, which then further keeps the truth away from the people. And and when we find that catalyst, and for some of us, like yourself and myself, the catalyst being grief, being the energy that shakes us, right? The lack of that person in physical sense shakes our core. And when you have that shake happen, it shakes up all the dust that has settled from all the things that we were given from other people, other institutions, other systems. And now we're just looking at life completely different because the dust has come up, and now we can start taking away and piecemealing our authentic self, who we really are without what people have told us. And grief, for me, has been the catalyst of understanding more about myself and why I move the way that I move in an indigenous perspective, and why I'm tied to the land the way that I'm tied to it, why I'm tied to spirit the way that I'm tied to it. It allowed me to be comfortable in my skin instead of trying to be this person for everybody else. But grief can be that. Grief can also have this upswing of unfolding, unraveling, undoing. And with all of that energy, you then bring forth spiritual energy towards you because you're like, okay, so what is it? What is happening? What's going on? And it makes you question outside of your linear way of questioning. The 1+1, this has to go, this has to go, this has to go. Now you're going obtuse. So why did this happen? What's the meaning behind this? Which then allows for God to respond. And whatever that means for you, whatever God means for you, whether it's science, the law of attraction, cause and effect, or some sort of spiritual practice, God of some sort. But you start to get those responses back.
Yes, to all the things. I am just sitting here marinating on this. This is so good. I can't wait for people to listen. So would you mind maybe just sharing more about with this grief and being on this journey, even in your role as being a medium and as a conduit for messages yourself from spirit, and even being able to participate in other folks' spiritual journeys? What's something that you maybe observe from other people's grief journeys that you take with you?
One thing I observe is the regret energy. The energy of, I didn't say what I wanted to say. I did not take care of. I did not do all the things in this life that I wish I would have done with that person. And the guilt that is attached to that regret energy. That is patternized, right? Every single person I have had contact with in a death doula capacity, and even personally for myself, like when I found out that my uncle was in the hospital before he actually transitioned, he texted me and was like, "Oh, I'm all right. I'm good." I was like, "Are you sure? You good? Because you're in the hospital." Everything. Then he said they had to resuscitate me. And then because he's a jokester and I'm a jokester, I said, "How did the upper room look?" Like, you were there. Tell me about the light, right? And he was laughing. He was lighthearted. But what I did not know is the seriousness of his illness. So that was the last engagement I had with him until I got a phone call that he has a little bit of time to live. So then the regret energy,
it's real,
crept in. If I knew if that was the moment I needed to say what I needed to say,
right,
which is I loved you, and make sure that there was care and concern, and that I stopped what I was doing and headed there to check on him. That regret energy is the pattern. And what I try to tell people in that regret energy is, if the physical body is laid to rest, then the energy of that person is still around. And guess what? You can still say the things that you want to say. You still have the time to say what it is that you want to say, whether it's in a prayer, you want to go out to the ocean, whatever it is that you want to do, they will still hear it. They will still get the message. So now we could transmute that regret energy into a energy of love and unconditional and continuous communication with that particular energy and or ancestor. And we don't have to just let them go and say, "Oh, now I can't talk." No, actually you can. You can continue to say their name and tell them, "I miss you. I love you. I wish I had more time, but I will make sure that I give you reverence. When I make my ancestor veneration, I'm going to make sure that I say your name and give you reverence because you're that important to me."
one of the things I carry it with me to this day is, and it goes hand in hand with what you're saying, is that you can still make memories with them. They pass. You don't, it just looks different. They're not here in the physical form, and it might take a while to accept that. And some people it takes years. Some people, they never even explore it because in their belief or how they were raised, it's no, once the physical body is laid to rest, that's it. But I think we know, at least in our journey, a lot more than that. But yeah, I carry that with me, that you can still make memories with your loved ones that have passed. If you're going on a trip somewhere, if you're having a major milestone in your life, carve out a space for that person to be there in those moments with you. Like you said, even if it's just saying their name, going to the ocean to visit them, having an altar or shrine at your house, having their pictures raised up. Or this is another reason why I wanted to do this podcast, because if folks don't have the access or the ability or the desire, because I do think it does take being in a certain mindset to want to open up that portal. And sometimes folks aren't ready, but I think that this medium, this platform is really good, this podcast, because it's like, if you haven't done that, maybe this can be the start to that journey. And just saying their name is so powerful. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and you just really never know what you will open the door to. But I am a believer that it's all things positive. If you open the door to connecting with loved ones that have passed and ancestors, I think only good can come from that. I really do. I think it'll encourage you to also go through your own exploration that you wouldn't have otherwise had, maybe had you not experienced. So yeah, I think it's just really important, I think, for people to hear that.
I want people to also understand and understand that when we talk about opening that portal to ancestors, that it opens up all things that are attached to ancestors, right? Just like scientifically, they talk about if your grandfather was an alcoholic and then your father was an alcoholic and then you're wondering why you are an alcoholic. It's things that are embedded in DNA, which means there's trauma, triggers, and things that are associated with ancestors that are not even ours, that we're holding 20-something generations filled with this information, this data that's in our blood. Yeah. So when we open up that portal, the goal is, yes, to sync up with the energies of our ancestors. But one of the other goals is to heal generational trauma.
Mic drop.
You have to heal generational trauma. There are things that are attached to my family that I am healing from opening up that ancestor portal. And sometimes it's not roses. Sometimes it's crying and snot bubbles, because you are realizing that some of the ways that you talk to people or some of the ways that you show up in relationships and intimate relationships are not even about you. They're about an ancestor that felt like their person was cheating on them. So if they were out for an extra 10 minutes, then they go into a spiral. And now you're wondering why you're spiraling.
Yeah.
So it is the concept of liberating. It is the concept of healing and knowing that your ancestral ties, while you say their names and you bring forth the positive and the good, that you're also creating space to heal what needs to be healed in your generational line.
That is a whole word right there. That's a whole word.
Amen.
Yes, that part.
Yeah.
But just touching upon the healing aspect more, I think that having experienced so much, I feel like our people have definitely attended more funerals than they have weddings. And it's honestly, that's traumatic in and of itself. But when families, when relationship, when friends, whoever, when you take the time to death plan, and to prepare for how you envision transitioning yourself, let alone other family members. I personally think that's very healing. It's hard. It's real uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable, but it's one of the most, like, if you're willing to go that deep with yourself and then repeat that with other people that are close to you in your life, really amplifies that healing that we're talking about. And so I would love for you to talk about your work with consulting cities and states around the cemetery work and really helping them convert to being more green and giving back to the land. And I just think that's really important because it's just powerful, right? We're talking about our healing. We're talking about healing of others and then also healing of the land. Would you be able to talk a little bit about your work with that and maybe your experience and key takeaways?
Yes, the work that I do in consulting is green natural burial implementation and integration in cities. So the goal is to go into the city, engage the city, and create a hyper-focused conversation and engagement around people of color and analyze best practices, analyze what it is that the community wants and or desires, see if there's interest in green natural burials, and then go in, revamp the policy so green natural burials can be implemented at city cemeteries. Green natural burials is basically the natural interment of the body with no embalming fluid, no vault or any type of cement vault, and the casket or container or shroud has to be biodegradable. It has to be something that can be broken down into the ecosystem of the earth naturally, which then limits the amount of pollution that you're putting in the land and or water. There is some research out there that talks about the connection of embalming fluid, which is a toxic chemical, seeping into water. There is also research and conversations around the metal from caskets seeping into water as well. And if the land is sick, then what do you think would happen if we start planting and continue to plant on sick land? Then our food is going to be sick, which then we are now pumping, even though we are organically eating from the land, we're eating from possibly a grave site because sometimes they don't tell you that information.
Right.
And in that land and that soil, you have embalming fluid and metals. And you're wondering why you start itching and you're allergic to metals. The land is sick. The land is sick. Yes. So I go into cities and the goal is to create green natural burials in those city cemeteries with my assistants and allow that to be an option. It's just increasing options for those particular cities and making sure that it's equitable too. Because if we create a space for green natural burials and then it's not equitable, then what are we really doing?
Yep.
Now, if you go out to a sanctuary that's privatized on investor money, that cemetery plot for green natural burials, you're going to have to dish out probably around $4,000 up front for that burial. City cemeteries tend to be cheaper. And the goal is for green natural burials, if somebody wants that type of experience, to be accessible in a city cemetery, because that's where people of color end up burying their ancestors. So that's the work that I do. And I got into this work through death doula work and people requesting green natural burials. And then when I started researching, I realized it's hard. It's hard. Some cities, there isn't any policies. Some cities, there's strict policy. Some cities had outdated policy. And navigating all of this for folks, I realized this is a thing because honestly, green natural burials it's a hot ticket thing now. But what we're really talking about is ancestral burials, the way that our folks did it before it got into capitalism and people making money off of it.
That's right.
It's what we did. So some of those key takeaways is if you are interested in green natural burials, you have to see what local policy says. Sometimes local policy is restrictive. Now, there isn't any federal laws, but local policy ends up being restrictive in reference to what you can do with a body. Like places in New York, you absolutely have to have a funeral director part of your engagement. So you have to take all of these things into consideration. And then another takeaway is when you take autonomy and sovereignty over your body, even in death, that is liberation. You are putting yourself in a position of saying, even in death, I'm going to have the revolutionary action of resting in peace the way that I want to. And with that, you get to curate your experience even when you are transitioned into the earth. And the way that you do that is through documentation.
That's right.
You have to document what you want, or you're going to get something that isn't necessarily in alignment with what you want. So curating that space, curating that document, saying, this is where I want my shroud or my container to come from. I want these hands on me cleansing me. I want this death doula to do these rituals. Or if you're in an indigenous practice, you have to go even further in the weeds because you need certain priesthoods, a part of your transition. You have certain offerings and things that you have to do, that priest has to do. All of these things should be documented. Who you want to put energy into your body before it goes into the earth is incredibly important.
And I think with all of everything, with curating this, definitely documenting it, but then talking about where those documents are, right? Normalizing the conversation with who your family members, people who will essentially carry out your wishes in a dignified way, need to know the location of where these documents are. They need to know that you're talking about these things, you're thinking about these things, and just having a conversation about it. And I think this is why we're having this conversation. But also just talking about the death industry, because it is an industry. They found a way to capitalize off of death and exploited that. Death already is a very reactive thing, right? People don't prepare until it happens, right? So how are we going to expect cities, local governments, heck, even our families, how are we going to expect these folks to dignify us in our death? Okay. If they did not even dignify us while we were alive.
Sure.
And that to me is just, we need to spend time thinking about that because this is already such a reactive topic. It's like, how do we normalize and integrate these conversations and topics and documenting it along the way so that it can be proactive, so that everyone's not scurrying, running around with their heads cut off, because that's usually what happens when a loved one passes away, unless you have knowledge of wills or access to trust funds or have generational wealth already somewhere documented. You don't have that type of access or that type of family, which, a lot of our families do not have that knowledge and access. Then we need to start this conversation. I think people are becoming desensitized and they're becoming numb to the point where it's, that's our reality. No, that's not normal. We need to talk about it and we need to fight for it. I really just appreciate everything you shared, and I hope people learn something about that. And I'm definitely considering doing a natural burial. I've even recently learned it's expensive. Not a lot of places do it, but I heard about doing hydrocremation.
Aquamation is basically cremation by water. And when we're talking about eco-friendly ways to transition, aquamation is way more eco-friendly than cremation by fire. Cremation by fire actually still gives off CO2 emissions into the air, which isn't healthy for our air quality. Cremation by water is very limited to that type of emission because it is a solution, a hydrolysis solution that is used to break down and deconstruct the body, but you still receive the same dust or remnants that you can do whatever it is that you wish to do, put it in an urn or what have you. You still have that process at the end.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's really, I'm looking into that. But again, it takes just as much time as we plan to live our lives and major milestones. We also need to plan for our death. And I always say that our death planning is our own responsibility. We do have helpers along the way that can help dignify it. But I've been to so many services, funerals, memorials, where it's like every time over and over again, yes, it captures the essence of the person, but not everything this person was and embodied. And for me, it does such a disservice. This person is a whole whopping universe, and then their world stops.
There's things that I wanted to do after getting into this space, getting into being a ritualist and a death doula, that I wish I thought about doing for my late grandmother who loved flowers. If I knew some of the things that I knew now, I would have created a shroud of some sort and then pressed flowers and floral things on that shroud and then tuck it in with her, right? Some of these final touches and beautiful things that are out there, if I had known, I would have helped curate a way more personable experience for my grandmother. So when I do this work now, I am thinking about somebody else's grandmother. I'm thinking about somebody else's grandpa, somebody's aunt, somebody's uncle, somebody's cousin. And I'm giving them an invitation to think outside the box. I'm giving them an invitation to create a ritual that particular person would have enjoyed, whether it's us doing something at a park that they walked upon so many times or whatever it is, but creating something very personable and not being this cookie cutter experience I'm inviting people to do now.
Yes. Something that just came into my mind too is a lot of the loss you mentioned in your life happened in your childhood, where maybe you wouldn't have as much the tools, the language to really understand what was happening. And I relate to that as well, where a lot of folks have transitioned when I was younger, where like everything is happening all at once. And I feel that a lot of my grief has hit me more now in real time, the older I get, because now I have the tools, I have the language, I have the access that we know that anyone can transition at any point in their life. So when someone passes when they are young, and they don't even get to live a full life, it is also of extreme importance for parents to take initiative and prioritize really understanding their child and their family member, because they can pass at any moment. And so it's tough. I feel like it's even harder to have those type of conversations when your loved one is young. But I just think that just how everyone else, every other family has normalized traditions, things that they do, this, I think, is to be added to that list.
Agreed.
So I'd like to transition. Every episode, I have a prompt that I ask a guest, and that is really because throughout my life, the way I've made sense of my grief is just channeling that through creativity and just creative expression. It's included a lot of writing, a lot of using humor, but yeah, just whatever way to just channel this grief. And so the prompt that you selected was, describe a dream that you've experienced where a loved one that has transitioned visited, and what you make of the dream. Like, what's your perspective on it?
Well, part of that dark humor is when he said, we're going to transition. I was like, yeah, totally transitioning right now. Yeah, exactly. So the most potent dream was in relation to my late grandmother. with her passing a few years ago. And I've had several dreams of her at this point, but the first dream was her giving insight about the family and letting me know I had to use my gifts to heal the family.
Whoa.
And the reason why she had to pass was to give me those gifts to heal the family. So when I saw her, she looked healthy. She was smiling, at peace, this glowing light behind her. But I realized she was informing me of my role with my gifts and that they're not just for public consumption, but for healing my personal family lineage. And it was powerful enough to reconfigure how I show up with my family as we collectively go through lessons together, and making sure that I prioritized healing and using my gifts for my family first before using it for clients. Because the goal is for me to heal 7 generations forward. So that energy of, no pressure at all. But anybody that is doing this work, anybody that's in a spiritual journey within their family, they are like the quintessential healer of that family. They're holding the weight because they're doing the work. So I realize that I am the family healer. So information that's passed to me from spirit that needs to go to my aunt. Sometimes I call her up and I say, hey, grandma showed up and said that she wanted you to know that she's okay and she loves you. And then my aunt starts crying. Why? Because last night she went to bed wondering why grandma has not showed up and if grandma loved her. So then grandma showed up in my dreams to tell me, tell her, tell your aunt that I'm here and I love her. So I'm to use my gifts for those moments in time so people know that no, grandma is very much around and looking and lurking and is here to be of assistance. But I have to take care of my family first and myself and make sure that I'm healed and that I'm constantly in a journey of healing, not just this lifetime, but all the other lifetimes that I am attached to simultaneously. And making sure that I am doing that work for myself and my family before doing that work for anybody else. And my grandmother in that dream reminded me that her leaving her physical essence cannot be done in vain, and that I need to make sure that my family gets all of the messages that they need in order to collectively elevate and remove ancestral blockages.
That's a word for everyone, especially I feel that when a loved one visits you, what an honor. Sometimes they're not always the most positive, but I think that dreams are always up for interpretation, and it's always fascinated me. But I feel there's always a message, and I think the message that you shared from your perspective was really beautiful, and I love that. I love that you took it and ran with it, literally, like you are living and breathing your gift. And I just hope it really inspires other people to do the same and not wait for someone to transition to embody their gifts and be in tune with all that they are. Because the sooner you get in touch with your gifts, your talents, like we don't have these interests and these hobbies by accident. Like channel them, fine-tune them, grow them, evolve them while you have the time. Don't wait till someone passes away. Don't wait till something bad happens in your life to get started, because you start on the very things that give you life, you're going to help save other lives and then liberate your family and your ancestors in the process. And I think that's what's so beautiful about everything that you shared today. How can people find you? How can people collaborate with you? Share all the things? Because I need more people to know you and the work that you're doing, the revolutionary.
I appreciate it. You can send me an email through my website, www.ericajavierbouvoir.com. I'm also accessible on Instagram. My handle is The Spiritual General, which is very fitting. And you could send me a DM to connect as well. Those are, I'm also on LinkedIn, Erica Javier Beauvoir. You can reach me there as well. Yeah, I respond to the emails and the DMs. Let me know. It goes down spiritually.
Yeah.
Spiritually. And the DMs, don't get it twisted. And just connect and we'll do some collaborating, or if there's something that you need, I can be of service. So so just thank you for this platform. Let's also take a moment to thank your ancestors and your guides for helping you create this space to navigate very important conversations that are not being had as often as they need to. So we elevate your folks in this space. And lastly, that moment where people feel lost. They don't know if they are doing what they need to do. They feel like something is off. They don't feel like they're being fed the way that they need to be fed spiritually. That's the moment when Spirit is saying, are you ready? That is the moment when you feel lost, is the moment when Spirit is saying, are you ready? And you have to decide if you are ready, because when you say you are ready, that means you have to take a leap. And I'll leave the congregation with that message.
Well, that was the perfect way to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. I also am grateful to your ancestors and just grateful for your energy and just honored to have you. Might have to have you on podcast again. So shameless plug there.
I'm here.
But with that, that's all for today, listeners, and we'll catch you next time. Grief Sense Familia. That wraps up another episode of the Grief Sense podcast. If this resonated with you, please feel free to share with someone who will appreciate it and tell a friend to tell a friend. Also, I'm a firm believer that feedback is a gift. So, I'm just saying, I won't be mad if you decide to leave a review and a rating of your experience on the podcast so far. Also, let's help each other find community in grief, and let's amplify these stories far and wide. Thank you for tuning in. En solidarity y con mucho amor, Mimi.